What have I always told you guys? Riffs win every single time. And in the case of the album that we're talking about today, these riffs are absolutely out of control and they win every single time. Hard carry, 1v9, these riffs here. So without further ado, I'm gonna look a whole lot different in about 3, 2, 1. Well, hello my friends, we meet again. It has been a while. Where should we begin? Sometimes you know you will love an album from the very first riff. It's sort of, where have you been all of my life type of vibe. And recently I had that experience with Crowbar's Sonic Excess in its purest form, which I also have made a video about, which you should go check out after this one. But even more recently than that, I had that same experience with a really underrated melodic death metal gem, and that would be Eucharist's Mirrorworld. I've been listening to this album nearly on repeat for the better part of like the last few months, and there's just something enchanting and very humbly honest about this record here. It absolutely reeks of that late 90s charm in the best way possible, right? It's 90s Melodic in some of the most purest form. Like the lyrical content, it seems to take me to a different world, a mirror world, in the way that's only rivaled by the atmosphere of some of the other greats of this genre, right? The two instrumentals of this album are absolutely fantastic, both for completely different reasons. This album just has so many appealing features. The best way I can put this is that this album is similar to, say, one of the great PlayStation 1 video games. You know, sure, it may not look the best, a little rough around the edges, right? But the care taken within the limitations of the genre, of the art, created some of the best and most iconic art ever. And to me, Eucharist Mirrorworld is one of those iconic albums and should have the recognition, along with greats like Slaughter of the Soul and the Jester Race. Now, I've been a big melodic death metal fan for many years, and so I was surprised when I saw a Reddit post a few months ago. This post essentially just said, quote, "This album is really good from the classic era melodic death metal. How come no one really talks about it?" End quote. And it was a picture of Mirrorworld's Eucharist. So I saw the cover, was intrigued by the post, so I went to listen to it. And from the very first opening notes of the opening track, Mirrorworld, I was just hooked. And you guys know me, I'm always intrigued by little known but well-loved records. So yeah, I'll repeat the question. Why is this so overlooked, guys? And don't worry, we'll get to the album itself here shortly, but let's take a look at Eucharist itself. Eucharist, the band, was part of the broader Gothenburg death metal scene in the early 90s, that melodic death metal stuff, right? They released a few demos and in 1993 released their debut album, A Velvet Creation, which perhaps deserves a video on it itself, another great album. Now, they would split up before their debut and then again after their debut album dropped, so there's never really any time to build anything up, to build any momentum. Their drummer, Daniel Erlandson, would actually play drums on In Flames' Subterranean EP and later on with Arch Enemy. Really cool stuff. He sort of springboarded off this. And then in 1997, the band would be asked to reform again and record a new record by newly formed War Records. So they got together, created some magic, toured for a short time, and then split up once again. So basically, in short, the band never really stuck around long enough as a cohesive unit to make any momentum, to remind people that they exist, right? They sort of dropped this album and disappeared, which is just such a waste for this talented group of musicians. I think there were some record label shenanigans as well, most notably due to the band signing to sort of like the losing side of the Wrong Again Records split. If any of you Swedes know more about that, there's precious little information in English regarding that. So if any of you Swede bros can maybe fill us in on that in the comments. Before we begin into it, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, boys, especially if you like riffs. Now, regardless, Eucharist dropped Mirrorworld in 1997, which I can only best describe as sort of the best mix of the big melodic death metal bands at the time. There's a lot of at the gates momentum and riffage here, but there's also more of that In Flames beauty and inherent catchiness, all combined with a smattering of that interesting, folky, sort of progressive element of early Dark Tranquillity. So without my further yapping, let me tell you about the best melodic death metal album that you have never heard. So the album starts out very similar to Blinded by Fear on Slaughter of the Soul, right? We get all this sort of like weird sounds building up into the album starts with a bang, right? In a way that I'm almost certain is a nod to At the Gates. We are entering the Mirrorworld itself. What follows is 4 minutes of the finest melodic death metal out there. Each riff could be a main riff in a lesser song, but Eucharist somehow managed to pack this song to the absolute brim with these fantastic riffs. I love the driving, relentless energy and momentum of this song. Absolutely fantastic stuff. Really, really, really great harmonizing of the main riff of the song as well. Love it! Alright, so one of the cool things that I really like about this album and the riffs in it that I mentioned a little bit before is that it really is sort of like the in-between of In Flames and At the Gates. So I played the opening riff poorly, mind you, right off the bat. And you can kind of hear what I'm talking about right off the rip, right? So, of course, right, B standard, very At the Gates. You have the, you know, the 5, 7, 8, the 1, 2, 3, whatever you want to call it, right? Like these 4 notes here, pedaling here and go. Like those are just melodic death metal, those notes right here. So Eucharist kind of do something very cool. That opening riff, really, really interesting. Ooh, there's that sort of At the Gates, the bluesy thing, right? That flattened 5. But what's interesting is on the second time they repeat that riff, they do this, which is very harmonic minor. So they're kind of getting bluesy and harmonic minor. You know, blues, it's like, you know, that's sort of like the blues scale in the minor context. And then harmonic minor, right? It's obviously classical, Yngwie Malmsteen, you know. So they kind of mix all those together and then they go to natural minor later on in the song in the second riff there too. Really, really cool. So they're mixing all these different modes of the natural minor scale, all these things together. I think it just sounds really, really, really sick. And I absolutely just love that opening riff. A really cool rhythm section on this album as well. The bass is very, very prominent, but not in like a bad way. And they don't really do anything fancy. It just locks in together so well underneath it to produce this great low-end roar. I really love the prominent and forward bass in the mix too. The drummer Daniel Erlandson also does this very, very cool cymbal choke in the middle of like a phrase. So it's like... He does one right at the beginning of the song, but also constantly does it throughout the album. Similar to the same thing the drummer is doing on Carcass's first couple records. I love that special type of stuff that drummers sometimes do. Vocals are done by Marcus Johnson, who also plays guitar. He also plays an Ironbird, very, very based in these live clips. I really do like his vocals here. It's very raspy, yet his diction is very, very sharp and clear. I understand all that he's saying, sort of sounds like a later At the Gates type of vocals. Also, I've noticed something about bands whose singers also play an instrument is that the songs tend to just simply have less vocals, as a singer has, you know, something else to do and doesn't need to fill his time with vocals all the time. This could be a positive or a negative, but here on Mirrorworlds, I think it is a huge, huge positive, as it really allows the riffs to breathe on their own. Which, speaking of riffs, I absolutely love how the chorus in the song is simply just this absolutely killer riff, which is the first time the song slows down at all is when we get to the chorus. Absolutely great stuff. And the slowdown really makes this riff feel extremely heavy and to stand out perfectly. I also like how later on in the song, when they come back to this chorus riff, the drummer then plays a blast beat underneath it instead of the halftime beat from before. Such a cool change to use the same riff, but in several different contexts. I love that type of stuff. Literal riff of the album on the first track, love it. Riff of the album! Yeah, I just really love the way they use open strings in this riff here too, right? You know, especially on the second time they go around. Like, what a gorgeous chord that is to play, right? Ooh, really gorgeous. And then I also really like the second time they play it, or I guess the last time in the chorus, they change it up and they go really, really gorgeous, kind of crunchy intervals right there. Really, really, really cool. Now, lyrically, the song is like a short poem. It feels like the lyrics are telling us that we are on this journey with the band to the mirror worlds, where the self devolves into this purple euphoria and rebirth and deliverance give new life. Very, very nice poetic lyrics, which again ring out in these comic melodic death metal themes, you know, like abstract heavenly places, death and rebirth, sadness, you know, all this stuff is ever so common in this time, but Mirrorworld just kind of nails the atmosphere. Absolute banger of a song, easy 10 out of 10. What a great way to start an album. Now, Dissolving is the second track here on the album, and it continues on with the energy and parade of great riffs. Although this song here is much more in flames than Mirrorworld, which is much more at the gates flavor in terms of intensity. Starting the song off with an interesting 3/4 time groove, the band also starts on the 6th chord of the minor scale, which is a major chord, which makes it feel major, right? As it's the first chord that we hear before they jump down to that minor 1, which is a very, very satisfying and heavy move. Kind of gives like this very like head fake feel to it, like, oh, we're major. Oh no, just kidding, we're actually in a minor. Dissolving also has some like odd and unique time signature changes throughout the song. Very, very cool and interesting. It almost feels like they jammed it out, like they didn't count this stuff here. And what I love is that in between the chaos, we return back to the intro riff, which gets reappropriated as a chorus riff several times. It's almost like we dissolve into the sea of crazy riffs before resolving into the chorus again. Cool. The song returns several times to the same motifs. I especially like when the band instantly snaps back into 4/4 time with another supremely glorious riff, which sounds familiar to some of the riffs from before earlier in the song, but different enough because of the time signature. Really, really cool. And we also get a guitar solo here on the song in this section. And which this album has, you know, uses guitar solos and leads very sparingly. But when they do, man, is it ever glorious. This song is a banger too. Lyrically, Dissolving continues what was spoken about on Mirrorworld and maybe seems to be painting a similar picture, right? Here again, we get lyrics referencing a losing of oneself, dissolving into a greater universe or perhaps entity. Very pretty poetic imagery. And one of the things I do love is like the splashes of color we get in these lyrics too, right? On Mirrorworld, it speaks of a purple euphoria, and Dissolving speaks of this witnessing scarlet sunsets, right? Themes of being reborn, maybe reincarnation of some sort. I don't know, really, really cool stuff, and we'll learn more about that as we go on. Great stuff. Love this track again. Absolute banger. 10 out of 10. As we get to the third track here, it is clear to me that the band had some enormous potential. I mean, you know, the late 90s to early 2000s are the absolute peak melodic death metal years. And I think a large part of the reason why this album, and to a lesser extent, A Velvet Creation, never got the love and attention that I think they deserve is honestly simply because, you know, they didn't release any music afterwards to remind people that these albums existed. Like imagine if In Flames just released the Jester Race and then called it quits. Would it be as loved and known? Maybe, but if they didn't release all their other successful albums after that, it wouldn't have gotten people looking back at their earlier stuff and seeing how good it is. Do you know what I mean? So I think that was sort of the big failing for Eucharist, right? Could never build any momentum to get people to go back and appreciate their older stuff. You know, a rising tide lifts all ships, but if you don't unrope your boat from the dock, you could get swallowed up by the sea and simply forgotten forever. And I think that is kind of what happened to Eucharist. Get a sip of that Diet Mountain Dew. Anyways, let's move on to the third track here, With the Sun. So the song begins with a quick drum fill and then moves into some cool harmonic riffage. And for some reason, the production, or I guess lack of production value, gets very, very noticeable on this song here. It's clear that these are all live drum sounds, and that is all great. And I love the organic feel and sound of this album. But during a lot of these sections of blast beats, the snare drum becomes practically unhearable. And it's like, so... Now the song is decent. I do like the very epic tremolo-picked leads, which come to dominate the second half of the song. And we get another great solo section. Really, really neat stuff here. I love that. The song ends by having the heavy instruments fade out into like a clean guitar playing these beautiful, beautiful arpeggios. Now these chord arpeggios are all centered around that power chord with the add 9 shape, right? Made a whole video about this. Death Sound Perseverance does this all the time. Pantera's Floods is another great example of this sound, right? But it really creates like a very sorrowful sound when used in the minor scale with that, 1, 6, 7 chord progression. Just so beautiful, and I love the way it fades out. Now lyrically, the song is very, very brief, with a lot of the words being held over multiple beats and much more of like an old school death metal approach to vocals in a way, right? I think this is a very impurposeful nod to In Flames here. You can see that. And once again, the song talks about a person leaving this mortal realm of existence and entering some sort of higher state. Quote, body and mind divorce as fire and mind unite. End quote. It seems to me that along with the title of the song, the Mirrorworld is this afterlife of some sort. Maybe it's in the sun, an abstract place where souls and minds, reside and unite until they can be reborn into another scarlet sunset. Perhaps his Mirrorworld is in the sun, or perhaps it is the sun itself. Again, beautifully somber, poetic lyrics. Also notice this phrase here, very, very important, and we'll get to that in just a bit. Pretty good song, not as good as the other two. I'll give it an 8 out of 10. Up next, we have the Eucharist, the song that is the self-titled song. When a band has a self-titled song on the second album, it has to be good, right? I find it interesting that a band decided to have a self-titled song on the second album, right? And an instrumental to boot. It speaks a lot of confidence in that one song. But anyways, we move. It opens up with some of the most glorious double-track guitar riffs that I can remember. I love this riff. Insanely catchy. And here we can really begin to appreciate this beguiling guitar tone that they have here. It's similar to the Swedish Chainsaw tone, which we all know and love, in a way that like the Jester Race did, right? They found a way to morph it into something beautiful rather than like intentionally brutal. It keeps all the power of it, but has a pleasant roundness to it. I love, love, love the sound of the guitars in this album. Now, I won't say too much about this instrumental. I think you should just go listen to it yourself. It is well worth your time. It has easily one of my favorite metal instrumentals of all time. There's so many great riffs. There's so many cool sections. It keeps up with this great atmosphere the album has been building as well. I will say this, right? This instrumental is a really, really great example of using the same riff again, but in different contexts. Go put on some headphones, grab a beverage, and just enjoy the riffage and solos here, boys. Great stuff. One of the best instrumentals ever, in my opinion. 10 out of 10. Up next, we just have Demons, which kicks off the second side of this record, beginning again with some ambient sounds of screaming, screeching, which I guess are demons. The song then begins with a riff that has a distinctly sort of like bluesy flair to it this time. Sort of like At the Gates meets like Entombed Wolverine blues to it here. Kind of cool like death and roll feel to it. Not often is melodic death metal mixed with like bluesy stuff, and I think it works well in small doses. Like I don't want an entire album like this, but this one song being like this is cool. It's good. Demons also brings like a little bit more death metal to it as well, right? Tons of groove combined with different blast beats going on. Sounds pretty distinctly different from the rest of the album. Feels like maybe this one was like an older song that they reused for this album, as it really stands out to me compared to the rest of their songs. It's much more brutal, bluesy than beautiful. I'm not going to say that it breaks up the great atmosphere that this album has curated so far, but it does sort of feel a little bit too rock and roll, I guess, compared to the others. I do really enjoy the short solo section of this song, cool little tapping stuff there, and I also have to come to really enjoy the odd little digital delays that bands sometimes use in this era and do out of the blue. Necrophages would do this all the time, but Eucharist does it as well with that yeah! Love that shit. Lyrically though, Demons is very interesting. Here it seems to me that his journey into the mirror worlds takes us to like a very grim and painful turn. Maybe we found ourselves in like the dark shadow version of our subconsciousness of the mirror worlds. Here they use allegories and sexual metaphors to sort of like escalate the obscenity of a situation. And here it seems like in this twisted or perhaps reflection of the mirror world where, you know, consecration is done through sex, I guess some demon host, right? The narrator cries out as he does the act, as he seals the deal, painting a really unusually vulgar picture, which I think works well to like escalate things here to like an extreme level. Not my favorite track here, but some of the riffs are pretty decent, and I do enjoy the lyrics. 7 out of 10. Fallen is the next track up, and it rights the ship, so to speak, right back into the very dark and beautiful melodic sound that the band has nailed up until the previous song. We get another cascade of great riffs, this time falling right into that mid-tempo range of groove and aggression that I just love. We get a few cool little touches here, namely a short little bass fill and then a clean guitar break right out of nowhere, right into the middle of the song. Cool. I just love those like small little touches when bands do that. So cool. This is the only song on the album which I can't find any tabs for, but I really like this riff here. Which of course is followed up by some great In Flames-esque tremolo picking. Always love that shit. The song probably has the best solo of the entire album too, which I think has really helped to stand out by the very simple under solo riff, which just sort of follows the Iron Maiden 1-6-7 chord progression. Ever so satisfying. It sort of strips everything back to make the solo stand out. Pretty great song instrumentally, although it does sort of overstay its welcome by maybe a minute or so, but minor complaint. Lyrically, the song begins to flesh out the ideas portrayed so far, which along with the song title Fallen, cements the idea that the album, you know, the Mirror Worlds itself is about to transition from life to death, falling out of it. Maybe there's something in between the Mirror World itself. Maybe the Mirror World is the in-between. Quote, my scarlet visions like reflections of my subconscious. Beyond the starlit heaven, the horizon burns with flames so red. As my eyes bear witness to this euphoria, this apocalypse, I hear the gates within my head open silently. A new world takes form, and its attraction tempts me to enter. I leave my body without farewells, peacefully through violet corridors, painted with beautiful reflections from my life. A sunrise beckons beyond the clouds, so dark as rivers stream through the air in stillness. Through the emptiness where thoughts take form and into the lands of purgatory, end quote. I'm sure you noticed the at the gates reference here, as well as the common lyrical motifs we have already talked about. Shades of color being used here, scarlet, red, and violet. Here again, purgatory is mentioned, right? It is made explicitly clear with a new world takes form and its attraction tempts me to enter. I leave my body without farewells, end quote. Here the band is using this idea of like the physical body we inhabit and currently exist in, right? Is only sort of like a transitory vessel for the soul. The brain's sort of like a radio receiver in between this world and the next, and when you go, you leave without farewells, right, as it was just part of you temporarily. And if anybody's ever seen anybody die in real life before, it really does sort of like seem like that. They leave their body without farewells. This song is just about as strong as the riffage. Beautiful poetry. I will give this a 9 out of 10. Up next we have In Nakedness, which is another instrumental, but vastly different from the song Eucharist. Again, we had In Nakedness was mentioned lyrically in a song earlier on. And this song is much more dark jazz than it is metal at all, right? Something maybe Bohorn de Club of Gore would produce. You know, this is an electric guitar and oboe duet, and one of the most enchanting and mesmerizing instrumentals I've ever heard. I'm pretty decent with music theory, but the chords and melodies being played here are just way, way above my pay grade. It seems every other measure is completely changing keys. Before we get right to the end, the climax of the song where the oboe is going crazy, hitting these high notes, the band goes back to this very classic 1-6-7 chord progression, right? We sort of have this confusion, this lostness. It feels naked before you find yourself again. You find a home key, you find a resonating place, right? And that's what this song really seems to resonate with me. So when you listen to it, you are sort of lost at the beginning. It takes you somewhere else. It takes you somewhere new you never heard before. So many different changes, so many different places, so many different keys, especially the oboe and the clean guitar playing this beautiful interchanging of melodies before, again, like I said, maybe you leave your body without farewells and you find yourself in the mirror world somewhere familiar. This is one of those ones where you just need to go listen to it, guys. My words can never do it justice. And in terms of the story, I think this is where, like I said, your naked soul is leaving the body without farewell and entering the violet euphoria, all symbolized in this stark duet. Brilliant work here, amazing stuff. 10 out of 10, guys. Blood Red Stars is the final track here and has the impossible job of following up the somber reflections of a nakedness. So what do they do instead? Crank up the aggression and speed to 200%. Absolutely amazing drum and bass work on the song just right off the beginning. I love it. It's so good. Again, guys, I've said it many times before, but riffs win every single time. And this song is once again just jam-packed with glorious riff after glorious riff. Trim pick goodness, where all the drums and vocals just go absolutely crazy over top. And underneath, we have this absolutely just fantastic flurry of riffs. Oh my God, man. To me, this really seems to be like a representative, like the rush or whirlwind, maybe, as the body leaves the soul and is sent to the blood red stars. Like you're being taken up, right? Just unrelenting and furious in a way. The lyrics tell the same story. Quote, I calmly leave my body behind through a cold, gloomy mist. I am floating into the land of stars. Sleepless nights filled with horror. Evil eyes stare into mine. Faces laugh as they melt before me. King of red stars, guide me out of this nightmare and burn with me in my paradise. Burn with me, end quote. Maybe we're going somewhere else. Maybe we're going to the hell. Maybe it's not a fun journey, but it's a rush either way, right? And with the last line of burn with me, the band beckons us to burn with them in the blood red stars of the mirror world. To not be afraid of what comes next, but to perhaps look forward to it, to cherish what we have now. And in doing so, we can appreciate our current state of life even more. Excellent song, maybe a bit too short. I wanted more riffs. Nice. 9 out of 10. And that ends Eucharist's underrated masterpiece, a true journey with deeply personal and beautiful poetry, reflecting on the unknowable, building this fantastic, dark, melodic and slightly somber yet hopeful atmosphere, combined of course with simply an endless waterfall of amazing riffs. And with those riffs we have this excellent tasteful bass playing and really wonderful exciting drumming performances here as well, not to mention great guitar solos and vocals. And like I said before, this really is one of the great early melodic death metal albums, and in my mind is right up next to Just Erase, Slaughter of the Soul, and The Gallery. Such an amazing refinement of the melodic death metal sound, and one you should absolutely check out. I have been Varvis. If you guys have any other underrated or interesting albums for me to check out, leave them down below in the comments. And as always, let the metal flow, boys. Cheers.